The Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Mr. Speaker, rock star to rock bottom, Mr. Speaker, led by the $100 billion man, Mr. Speaker. $100 billion. What I'll say about Muldoon, he only borrowed $19 billion. Pretty poor effort when you've got John Key, who's borrowed $100 billion in 7 years, Mr. Speaker. The trader, the smiling assassin, the PM who likes Hawaii, Mr. Speaker, he likes here and he loves himself, Mr. Speaker. He said that he wanted Fonterra shares to be traded. Mr. Speaker, he said that New Zealand should be the financial hub of Asia-Pacific region, Mr. Speaker, until he found out it was going to cost a whole lot of money and Treasury advised him not to go down that path. Mr. Speaker, he's a guy who does not have a vision, has not developed a plan, Mr. Speaker, and I don't agree with my colleagues who say, where's Plan B? Because there's never been Plan A, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I can quote Hoskins, and I have to say, he's one of the greatest cheerleaders of the Prime Minister I have ever heard, Mr. Speaker, and he's usually full of it. But what he said yesterday is, quote, "What worries me about this country is our view is so short-term," Mr. Speaker. Well, he's right. And his mate, John Key, has been in charge of this country for 7 years without any plan being developed for our future, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bill English's constituents must be horrified. What will the Diptonites think down there of his Conservative bill coming to Wellington and raking up $100 billion worth of debt, Mr. Speaker? I think they will have thought, well, he's gone to Wellington, and so's his sense of reality, Mr. Speaker. I know that they would certainly not be voting him back in. Mr. Speaker, where does it leave our economy, that lack of plan? We've got dairy industry facing some huge challenges, Mr. Speaker. It was the star of our rocky economy, Mr. Speaker, but now, Mr. Speaker, not so. Because there's been no vision, no strategy, no plan for where we might go, no diversification, Mr. Speaker, that failing to plan has meant that we have planned to fail, Mr. Speaker. Fonterra itself must take some responsibility. It's set up a global trading platform that's simply driven the price down, Mr. Speaker. It's the only New Zealand producer of dairy products on that platform, and there's only one other person or one other company selling. It is not an internationally recognised global trading platform, and so it's only giving indicative prices for dairy products. Mr. Speaker, can I say that John Key has been determined to see the dairy industry on the stock market. He provided that through TAF, Mr. Speaker, and now we have a company that's split between the loyalties to its shareholder or unit holders and that of its supplying farmers, Mr. Speaker, and that dilemma has distracted the directors. Can I say, on a day that the ASB has announced a record profit of $859 million, one of its directors sits on the board of Fonterra. I think when 500 staff at Fonterra are going to come under scrutiny, so too should the directors. There are 3 directors of Fonterra that sit on the major trading banks of this country that have effectively lent $34 billion to dairy farmers, Mr. Speaker. We're told by cheerleaders of the government not to call this a crisis. I say to you, put yourself in the gumboots of the farmer who's been encouraged to borrow money, to grow his business, to grow the exports, double the exports this government has said, and now faces not only declining equity and a lack of viability, but in fact a very, very bleak future. Mr. Speaker, it's not looking too good. Our rock star economy has got to rock bottom. Yes, there are some stars, the beef industry temporarily, the wine industry and horticulture, but our number one industry, dairy, Mr. Speaker, is on its knees at the moment, and it's going to be a big, big effort to get it out. Mr. Speaker, we have seen no direction, no support, no help from this national government, and what we say is that it will once again take a Labor government to get the dairy industry out of the doldrums. And it starts in the 30s, in the 1950s, Mr. Speaker, in the 70s, and when we formed Fonterra, Mr. Speaker, and we made the hard call to take off subsidies. We are always prepared to make the hard decisions, show the leadership across the agribusiness sector, and make sure that this economy goes forward. At the moment, we face a very bleak future, Mr Speaker, because the national government has failed to plan and inevitably will plan to fail, Mr Speaker, and the one person responsible is the traitor over that side of the House, Mr Speaker, John Key, who came into this House wanting to sell off everything and grow nothing.
Time has expired.
Mr Speaker.